I'm someone who has been very, very fortunate in terms of education, and the most educational year of my life, aside from the year when I learned to read, was the year I spent in prison. Maximum security prison for planting corn on top of a nuclear missile silo site. I don't know why I don't go out and do it more often. And I do also want to mention that the day I planted the corn, I was kneeling, handcuffed in a field, and the soldier behind me with the gun, not on my head, but aimed at me. It was a hot day. He was a kind young man, really. And at one point, I mean, I might have lasted about a minute and a half in silence, and then realized there was no off switch. And finally, I asked him, do you think the corn will grow? And he said, I don't know, ma'am, but I sure hope so. And then I asked him, would you like to say a prayer? Yes, ma'am. And I said a memorized prayer, the prayer of St. Francis, make me a channel of your peace. Where there is darkness, let me so light. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that I may never seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be pardoned as to pardon, to be loved as to love with all my soul. And then he said, amen. And then he asked me, ma'am, would you like a drink of water? And I said, oh yes, please. I was very thirsty. I'm handcuffed, right? And then he said, ma'am, please tip your head back. And I did. And I can still feel that water dribbling down my chin. So I just ask you to stay with me for a moment with that young soldier's question. Would you like a drink of water? Asked of a perfect stranger, and I must have seemed pretty strange, kneeling on top of ground, covering a nuclear weapon. He put his gun down. There's no way he could have squeezed that canteen to get the water down my throat and still aimed the gun. It just couldn't have been done. So he took a little bit of a risk, disarmed himself on top of the nuclear weapon he was supposed to guard, to give a drink of water. Would you like a drink of water? If we could ask that question to a child in Yemen, facing cholera, in places where they don't call it cholera, they call it acute watery diarrhea. A child facing death. If we could ask that child, would you like a drink of water? Or bring it closer. Go to Flint, Michigan. Would you like a drink of clean water? And bring it even closer, and we're so glad to have the reminder and the beauty of each child in this room with us today. Thank you for coming. But, you know, we have to think to the future. Would they, those future generations in this country, like a drink of clean water? And so we have before us such a monumental task, facing the terror of what we're doing to our own environment, facing the reckless wrongfulness of the supposed Great War on Terror, where any spot on the globe can suddenly become a target, and then facing the current president who says, America first, in the line of that exceptionalism. So part of our work is to say, yeah, America first in weapon sales, America first in weapon development, America first in being the most dangerous, the most menacing country on the planet. These are hard words to absorb. But I have the great privilege of going back and forth to Afghanistan. And I want to tell you about a surveillance system. I'm so appreciative of people who came from Syracuse and all the fine work that's been done at Hancock Air Force Base. But I want to talk about a different kind of surveillance. I know teenagers in Afghanistan, and I've known them now since they were young teenagers, 11, 12, 13 years of age, at Canaan as well. Well, these kids do surveillance all right. They have surveys, and they go up the mountainsides and out to the refugee camps, and they go as best they can with people from tribes other than their own. And the surveys they have are questions that they ask of widows and desperate women who can't feed their children. And they very respectfully ask them, how many times a week do you eat beans? What's your source of water? Who brings an income into this family? And how old is that person? And especially when the age of the income earner is 5 or 6 years of age. Then they put an extra mark on their survey. And they go back and they sit together with these surveys and these very hard questions. For young teenagers, they should be out, riding bicycles, they should be playing sports, they should be flirting with each other, but they're teenagers. I'm sure they're doing what teens do in many, many, many ways, but they sit down with their surveys and then they try to understand who is the most needy. And I've watched them over the years form a project such that they can employ the widows and the desperate mothers to make the heavy blankets and then give those away for free to the people in the refugee camps. And now they've got 100 children who would be otherwise child laborers full-time and full-time candidates to go into some kind of human trafficking, maybe prostitution or maybe drug running, but they get these kids into a school and they've had remarkable success with literacy. I know we have others who've done this in Ghana as well. And it's such a wonderful thing to see these kids. They learn so quickly. And now those young ones are helping put together the Debate Project. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that wonderful kind of systematic surveillance. And I look at the drones that are flying overhead, the tethered blimps, just huge numbers of people involved in the high sophisticated technology to create the kind of surveillance the United States is doing. And I say to myself, in a lot of ways you don't stand a chance up against what can come forth in our world as people follow that simple, simple prescription that came from the Old Testament prophets. It was shared around through trade winds. It was shared around because it made so much sense. We still have it today. What does the Lord require of us? This and only this, that you do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. And so I'm so grateful to be here in a room with people today who have heard that call. You've done your best every time you've taken your foot out of your bed every morning to follow that call. And this is how we can move our world forward. Always trying to scrutinize Emily's questions. Always trying to learn from Imad Faisal's rich and wonderful history. But always trying to choose the works of mercy rather than the works of war. And believing that we can one day put an end to war. Thank you very much.